Welcome to my channel and thank you for choosing to watch this video. My dear viewer, with today's episode, I would like to take you on a journey to the depths of our inner being. And more precisely, I would like to take you to a place where all our thoughts, our feelings, plans, ideas, and our dreams come into being. But also to a place where we store all the encoded information, including our acquired knowledge, and also memories of the past. My friend, I truly believe that the human body is a truly extraordinary creation with remarkable abilities. Abilities that many of us don't even know about yet. And although science over the years has actually managed to prove a lot of significant facts about the secrets of the human body, there is still something that science cannot explain. Namely, it's about certain innate wisdom that can only be discovered and experienced by those who fully devote themselves to the spiritual path of healing and self-development. So, what can you expect from today's episode then? My dear viewer, in today's episode, I will go into detail about what it actually means to undergo an inner transformation. And here, I'm going to explain, based on my own example, what this process looks like before, during, but also after. And although in my previous recordings, I have already mentioned this type of internal transformation. Today, using concrete examples, I will break this process down into stages and then explain the difference between each of them so that you can see clearly how over time changes and transforms our vision of perceiving the reality that we create. And so, in the first part of this episode, I'm going to explain what my life was like before awakening. And here, using specific example, I will tell you about some crucial moment in which I actually experienced enlightenment or awakening. Also, I will share with you some of the most significant experiences that ultimately helped me to see these changes taking place in me. And here, among other things, I will tell you actually about how over the years my perspective of perceiving my past experiences has actually changed, but also how the view of myself and the reality that I was creating and still create have changed since the beginning of this whole beautiful process or journey. In the second part, on the other hand, I will explain what in spiritual sense means the term rebirth, as well as tell you about life through the eyes of already awakened person. Whereas in the third part, I'm going to make summary and therefore I will share with you some of my insights from this entire process so that you can reflect on your own situation and decide whether or not you're actually ready for such powerful changes. Therefore, I cordially invite you to listen. Let's start with the fact that neither at home nor at school has ever been said about working on our creativity and imagination, two of the most powerful inborn human abilities that we haven't been taught to use. And here, of course, comes the question. Is it even possible, I emphasize, to function healthily in everyday life without using them? I'm afraid the answer is no. To create our reality, we need both our imagination and creativity. Unfortunately, due to the fact that school institutions downplay their powerful role in contributing to our self-development, today our world looks the way it does. People lack imagination, or at least at the moment is very limited. Fortunately, I as a child quite quickly discovered these extraordinary abilities in me. Sometimes it even felt as if my imagination was overly activating, to the point where the images I was able to create in my mind were so clear that they almost felt real. And so one day I realized that these abilities, if misused, they also have their negative sides and consequences. If only because often, instead of facing some of my struggles, I rather preferred to escape to the world of imagination and pretended that everything was fine. I don't have any problems. When in reality was actually the opposite. So we can say that back then I didn't know how to use these abilities skillfully. And I didn't know because I didn't set healthy boundaries for myself. On the other hand, however, I grew up in a fairly rigorous environment, I would say, where fantasizing was considered only to be distraction. And that's certainly why I was often told to finally come down to earth and stop fantasizing. So, as you can imagine, it wasn't easy to be different from the rest. But, of course, this didn't stop me from me being me. And although I didn't understand at the time what the law of attraction is and how it actually works, deep inside, I believed that my reality could actually look as I was imagining it to be, and maybe even better. So often, for example, I wondered what kind of person I would become in the future. Will I keep my sense of humor, my, say, enthusiasm or curiosity about the world? Or perhaps, as I get older, I will lose myself in my daily duties and become someone else. And although we know that we can't really predict these things, still, deep down in my heart, I actually wanted to believe that my vision will come true someday. That's why, as a child, I created the image of the character that I would like to become one day. And so I imagined how I would like to look like, how I would like to conduct myself, the way I would like to talk, and even how I would like to live and what kind of lifestyle I would like to lead. All in detail. But unfortunately, over the years, it actually turned out that there are so many different external factors which shape our personality that it's impossible to determine which of them will contribute the most to who we eventually become. Besides, the truth that school institutions instill in us is very different from the truth that we carry within us. However, we don't even get a chance to choose because the influence of the environment, but also the psychological blocks which arise during the process of growing up are too strong. So eventually they take control over our mind and, as a consequence, distance us from our nature. And so we begin to ignore our intuition because our feelings don't align with the reality our environment presented to us. And since peer pressure has a huge impact on our lives, especially when we're just learning about the world around us, therefore, at some point, we feel that we simply have no choice but to give in to it. And so, unconsciously, we start to create all kinds of masks that would help us survive in this illusory world. And I call it illusory because being someone you're not, it's obvious that your life cannot be real, cannot be a reality. And here I would like to highlight a very interesting fact. We say that children have amazing imagination, while adults seem to be deprived of it. And do you know why? Let me tell you why. Because at some point in our adolescence, we're being subjected to programming, where they teach us to live according to a certain pattern that actually limits our possibilities and therefore deprives us of the chance to discover our true nature and our potential. So here comes the question. Who are we really? And what our true abilities are? But also, what would the world and our lives be like if we were taught how to use our innate talents and abilities? And the answers to these questions you will surely find later on in this video. Therefore, listen carefully, because perhaps it is today that your perspective on our reality will significantly change. In retrospect, I know that my life before I even experienced awakening was like one big chaos. I knew I was looking for something, but I wasn't sure what exactly. And that's certainly because no one around me was able to answer my deep questions about the meaning of life. And I just couldn't understand why people aren't interested in the real purpose of our existence, of our life. And so, on the one hand, I was haunted by my deep questions, but on the other, I had to face a reality that was completely meaningless to me. And all this made me unable to eventually find myself in my surroundings. Until finally, like all of us, I also was eventually consumed by the material world and the pursuit of money, to the extent that at some point I also started to believe that it's actually money that makes people happy. Or rather, this knowing that if you have money, you'll be able to buy anything you like. And that was supposed to make us feel happy and fulfilled, I believe. Unfortunately, back then I had no idea that in childhood I had unconsciously created a limiting belief related to money. The belief that made money quite difficult for me to access. And why? Because I kept telling myself that in order for me to have money, I will have to work hard for it. So for years, I have devoted myself to nothing but work. But unfortunately, of course, I realized quite quickly that once I had it, the enormity of my needs, which by the way kept growing, made my hardly earned money literally disappear as quickly, as if it was only an illusory feeling of having it. And so, with the passing years and the lack of progress, I eventually realized that I had become, in a sense, a prisoner of my own mind. Except that at that time, I wasn't aware that the only delusion was precisely the belief related to money. And that's why, over the years, I haven't made any progress. Because I was going round in circles. I kept repeating the same mistakes. Another such belief was the belief that people will only respect me if I achieve some great success. So most of the things I did it just to please others. Because let's face it, the unaware man does everything he does only to praise himself in front of others. So, for example, what we do, we boast about our, for example, completed field of study, about our title, about our earnings, new material possessions, promotion at work, or we brag about our social status and many other things. So, in other words, we look for the approval of others so that we can appreciate ourselves, but also our efforts and achievements. But of course, unaware of his behavior man will never admit that he is actually acting like that. As for me, however, I am not the type of person who likes to brag. So for me, this type of behavior made absolutely no sense. But unfortunately, not knowing any other reality than this, I was simply just trying to fit in. And because of that, somewhere deep inside, I felt as if I was torn into two. Because on one hand, some part of me was actually still trying to be like the others, while the other part made me feel that I wasn't doing the right thing. And yet, despite the different voice of my intuition, I acted against my feelings. And that's why today I believe growing up was a really hard time for me. However, despite the fact that there were times when it was really hard for me, instead of doing something about my problems, I pretended to myself that I didn't have any. And today I know that I chose to run away from my problems because I didn't want to reveal any of my weaknesses to others. I was simply afraid that if I did it, I would lose control. Control that, by the way, I didn't have anyway. After all, the course of life, we know already from the previous recording, cannot be fully controlled. But, of course, unaware man doesn't know it. Which is why I say that we all live in hypocrisy, in a lie, illusion. Besides, I know from experience that hardly anyone cares about our problems. On the contrary, people tend to be happy when something goes wrong in our lives, which is sad. Perhaps you have experienced this, my dear viewer. Very sad thing. So, thinking I chose the lesser evil, I just pretended everything was fine, where in reality I felt terribly lost. And so over the years, I have fallen from one extreme to the other. And as a result, I was constantly moving, changing my surroundings, jobs, interests, friends, everything. And so I eventually developed health problems, both mental and physical. But of course, again, instead of seeking help, I chose to throw myself into work and partying. So I was doing literally everything to escape my negative thoughts, but also to forget about this feeling of emptiness, at least for a moment. And so until the conflict that arose in me grew to such an extent that I completely lost control of it. And so then I became even more prone to addictions and uncontrolled mood swings. And these mood swings, in turn, made me project my negative emotions onto other people. And I recognized it when my behavior started to hurt innocent people. And it was also then that I realized I'm not the same happy person as I used to be. because now I felt more and more anxious, stressed, irritated, and above all lost. So we can say quite a normal state for many of us. And on the top of everything, I forgot to say, I felt left alone in all this chaos. Nobody understood. So to sum up, mentally, I was in such hopeless state that now the only way out of my situation was some breakthrough moment and change, because the smaller ones didn't work for me at all. And so this more or less is what the life of unaware man looks like, my dear viewer. We lie to ourselves that we are happy while feeling empty and torn inside. And yet we ignore our feelings and pretend everything is fine. After all these restless years of chasing after something that actually deepened my suffering even more, I finally got enlightened. There was a point in my life when I eventually realized that I couldn't do it on my own. And it was actually then that I realized or remembered the existence of the Creator, a higher power which after all has control over everything. And so every day I was literally begging for some kind of change. I asked God to show me the way, to free me from this maze full of obstacles and challenges. But I also asked for simply to help me clear my mind of all those negative and intrusive thoughts, because I felt as if I lived in a dormant state for far too long. So as you can see, you experience awakening at this most crucial, but also the least expected moment. So when you ask for help and guidance, you're actually unconsciously agreeing to make a powerful change in your life. And that's exactly what happened in my case. It was very interesting. And so, literally, in an instant, I realized that I would never be happy if I would continue to listen to others and act as they did. I also understood that material goods will never fill this inner void, because this feeling of possessing something, I have already said earlier, is only an illusion. Such fleeting moment that quickly passes, and then it takes us back to the starting point. And so over and over and over again. So when that day the blindfold was finally removed from my eyes, and so my mind was cleansed also of all unnecessary toxins, as I call it, I realized that I was responsible for all this mess. After all, I was responsible for what was going on in my head, and therefore also for my negative attitude towards myself, others, and life itself. But also, it was me, myself, who allowed others to instill in me their limiting views and beliefs. And to tell the truth, at the beginning, I had a grudge against myself and a sense of guilt for all the mistakes I had made in the past. And I say mistakes because back then, I was ashamed of my previous actions. Actions such as, say, doing something against my own will and feelings, imitating others, so living a lie, ignoring my intuition, or the needs of my body that clearly communicated to me about any existing problems. And on the top of that, partying and experimenting with drugs, which means consciously poisoning my body. And when actually years later I look at my past behavior from the perspective of an observer, it was really, but really hard for me to believe that I had ever committed such acts, knowing perfectly well that I am not helping myself, but only harming my body, a body that's meant to serve me for the rest of my earthly experience. I felt ashamed of my actions. And so, in this way, it became obvious to me that I would never love myself and my body unless I took care of my health and well-being. But with the passing time, or say with the next stage of the awakening process, this grief actually faded away, because now I understood more and more that I couldn't blame myself or others for something we did unconsciously. So I realized that I was too lost to see that escaping into work or drugs wasn't actually the solution to my problems. And that's how I actually learned forgiveness. I felt that I had to forgive myself, but also others, for all these unconscious actions taken in the past. Actions that over years created in me disgust and hatred towards myself, but also others, absolutely unnecessarily. But of course, it wasn't just enough to say, I forgive myself and others, because in reality, it will take some time for you to fully accept your new truth. So you should know, dear viewer, that these negative feelings will keep coming back from time to time. Therefore, in the course of such process, we learn to look at the essence of all things from different perspectives. We need to realize that repressing these negative feelings is actually not helping us, but harming. And when you understand this, which means you accept your new truth, then you move on to the next stage. So now, in this next stage, in addition to forgiveness, you're also beginning to see opportunities for development. And here I will use my own example. After having made an in-depth analysis of my past, at this stage, I was able to see that in fact, with each experience, I was actually growing my inner strength. In addition to that, I was also able to discover all sorts of abilities in me that I would never have even thought about before. And it's actually thanks to all these difficult experiences. And once I understood that, all of a sudden, going back to my old memories no longer caused me pain or suffering. On the contrary, because now I understood that thanks to the preserved memories, I actually had a chance to compare my progress in self-development. And that's how I learned to actually skillfully draw conclusions from all these past experiences. And then I also realized that at the turn of all these years, I actually learned a lot of very important lessons. But that's not all, because then I suddenly began to see the connection between all these experiences, as if everything was perfectly planned so that for each of these experiences I would learn something completely new about myself. But not just about myself, but also about life and other people. So the next time I was put in some seemingly uncomfortable situation, this next time I didn't panic anymore, but approached it with calmness and caution. Because from now, I look at each of these repeated situations as tests to see if I actually learned my lessons. And so, moving on to the next stage. This time, it was about understanding the entire mechanism of how the universe works. And that was really interesting. And here I realized that everything in the universe has its own specific cycle, which means the duration of something. Therefore, I believe the life cycle can also be divided into such periods. So, for example, into stages of our development, self-development. And although in the beginning, due to our unawareness, we go through such cycles unconsciously, from the moment when we experience awakening, we begin to go through it fully consciously. And why is it actually so important that we go through these cycles consciously? Well, because only then will we be able to close the old ones and thus start the new ones. Otherwise, there is a possibility that we will be exposed to repeating the same cycle, but without the possibility of further development. And that could also mean we keep repeating the same mistakes. So, something that is quite a normal behavior for unconscious men. And so, once I understood the entire mechanism of how the universe works, I knew that by making changes in the way I think and look at life, I would be also able to change the entire course of events. And by the way, I don't mean to deceive destiny, but to change its course. And thanks to this knowledge, I trusted that regardless of the situation, with the experience gained in the past, now I'll be able to deal with everything and anything. Because now my perspective of seeing everything was much broader, expanded with new information. So much so that I was able to identify where exactly I was making a mistake and how I could fix it to eventually complete this given stage or cycle, we said. Which means I was continuously drawing conclusions and learning lessons from each of these experiences. And this, dear viewer, is how the whole process of inner transformation more or less looks like. So there comes a point when you start asking yourself first these deep questions about, we said, the meaning and purpose of everything, really. And that's how you experience awakening, which means suddenly you start to see everything in a totally different light. And that's actually when understanding also comes. And with it, ultimately, we said healing. In turn, once this healing takes place, then you begin to build your life anew. Except that now, fully consciously. And here, very important point. At the beginning, history can still repeat itself. And here, for example, you might find that some situations reoccur. Or perhaps some old friends reappear on your way. But there may also be newcomers who, by their behavior, will remind you of people you knew in the past. That's a very interesting one. And these people will try to evoke all sorts of negative feelings in you in order to, of course, bring you down, bring you back to your old state. And this eventually, or actually, will be your golden opportunity to check at what stage in your development you are now. And you will learn about it from your reaction to all sorts of these emerging situations. So, for example, the way you approach a given person or a situation. Will you get carried away? Or actually, you will stay calm this time? And After all this, you will finally be able to actually determine whether or not there have actually been any changes in your perception of your reality. And to tell the truth, it doesn't really matter how long this whole process takes, because when you suddenly experience such powerful revolution in your development, in your life, your level of understanding and also perceiving everything makes you a completely different person. Brand new, we said. So you get rid of all unnecessary ballast and slowly start to build your completely new reality. A reality in which you will definitely not allow any external factors to have even the slightest influence on you. Therefore, you stop chasing after something or rushing patiently, because now you trust that everything is for your benefit. So it's happening for you and not to you. So you finally give yourself time to relax and recover. So as you can see, it's thanks to all these changes in perception that your approach to life changes. And with it, of course, your way of thinking. And this means that you are reprogramming your belief system. And that's what actually makes you develop or make progress in your development. And as soon as you get rid of all the limitations and blockages, your vital energy begins to significantly increase. And so this raise in energy ultimately leads your body into a complete cell replacement and consequently DNA reprogramming. I am not joking. So the higher the vibration of your energy becomes, the faster you heal your body. Body that has powerful self-healing property. And yes, I know I repeat myself, but this is so exciting that it's impossible not to mention it again. After all these years of internal changes that have taken place within me, I realized that we shouldn't stick to only one truth just because it seems convenient to us. Dear viewer, the cycle of life is constantly moving forward. So in fact, everything changes with each passing second. Therefore, we should also constantly undergo changes that occur both in our environment and within us. And that means we should accept them without resisting them or even more fighting them. And I say we should accept the changes and go with the flow of life because, in fact, it's through our habit of sticking to old beliefs that our life actually becomes uncomfortable. But also our lack of open-mindedness, lack of flexibility in thinking, or too limited, too narrow mindset. All this actually makes us unable to face the obstacles and challenges that we encounter on our life's journey. Therefore, the only solution or salvation or liberation from this illusion of life that we live in is the aforementioned awakening and spiritual development that comes with it. Therefore, working on trying to understand yourself, finding the meaning of your existence and the meaning of your life. But you must remember that in order for our work to actually bring some positive results, we will first have to disconnect from the old beliefs in order to make room for the new ones. And here it's also worth remembering that as you progress, these beliefs will also continue to change. We must take into account the fact that something that serves our development today may turn out to be useless in a year or even a month's time. And that's why I believe it's also necessary for us to achieve inner balance, so that we don't feel too overwhelmed by all the changes that are continuously taking place. And therefore we should also get rid of our addictions and bad habits, because this disturbs our balance. But above all, we should focus on the practice of unconditional love, of course, compassion, and selfless service to one's neighbor, which is something that seems almost impossible to do for an woman. And when we ultimately manage to achieve it all, and I believe we will eventually succeed, that's when rebirth occurs. We call it rebirth because in the process of awakening, at some point our old version of us dies, so that a whole new version can be born in its place. An improved version that is healed and cleansed of all the toxins which previously blocked the flow of love energy, or life force as you prefer, in our body. So you literally become a purified, brand new being. And then the whole magic starts to happen. So suddenly, the image you see in front of your eyes is so clear that now you're not only able to see the real intentions of others, because now you're also able to intuitively sense it. You're literally X-raying people. You know when they lie, when they are scared, when they pretend, when they're worried. You see it and you sense it. But anyway, my dear friend, don't get too excited, because you don't judge them. Because now you're more, intuitively sense the reason for their behavior. Besides, now you're more understanding and empathetic towards others. So instead of actually arguing with people or judging them, you give them that sense of forbearance, compassion, but above all, of course, love, unconditional love. And here, I would also like to make an important point. No matter how good your intentions are, what you cannot control is how others react to your actions. So please, my friend, don't expect everyone to receive you with respect and gratitude, because when someone feels exposed, for example, they feel like you know they're lying, or that they are afraid or pretending to be something, they will feel ashamed of their actions. And that's why they will try to hide it under the mask of, for example, anger or aggression, often aggression. And by the way, they sense that you know the truth in your deep gaze, which is now as pure as drop of water. And the ego of an aware man is actually afraid of this gaze. Therefore, an unhealed person often avoids actually interaction with the healed one, because there is too high energy difference between them. So an unhealed person avoids this awakened one because the high frequency of the awakened aura triggers negative emotions in them. And you will sense this, you will feel this. On the other hand, continuing about the changes that occur within us during such process, now you will begin to take more care of yourself, because now you understand the meaning and importance of self-love. Because as an awakened person, you will know your values, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, and therefore you will trust and believe in yourself like never before. And by listening to your own intuition, you will also be able to even anticipate events. That's why you'll be able to manage to avoid these unfavorable situations or any confrontations, say. In this conscious state also, when we share our opinion with others, our focus is not on differences, but actually on similarities. And in this way, we learn to compromise. We can also finally clearly define our goals, but instead of focusing on achieving them, we focus on every action and the steps we take towards achieving them. What's more, we also devote ourselves to our life's mission, I call it, with passion and love. We also always consider feelings, both our own and others. That's a big one. The conscious person also sees life as an opportunity for development. That's why we derive as much as possible from all these experiences. And we don't think about past pains anymore because we have already healed them. But also we don't focus too much on the future because now we are consciously building a new reality. So we don't have to worry about the future because we know that by remaining in a positive and a high vibration, we can manifest the life as we imagine it to be, and even better. And since we know our own truth, it means we don't have to pretend to be someone we are not. Thank God. Because now we know perfectly well who we are, where we are going, and what our goals are. And therefore we can easily cut ourselves off from anything that doesn't actually serve our development. And here, let me cut in. I want to share something. When your extra senses become active, you automatically become very intuitive with that. And then you can even sense what someone is thinking or feeling. So, for example, from my experience, many times in conversation with someone, I literally knew what they are going to say or what they would like to say, but perhaps they felt embarrassed to say it. So what I did, in my words, I suggested that they can go ahead and share what they just thought about. And so in this way, I actually tried to make them feel more comfortable in my company. So as you can see, all the such skills seem to be magic and therefore difficult to comprehend. When you cleanse your body of all toxins, it turns out that the possibilities of your body, including your mind, are truly unlimited. So to go on, as an awakened person, you respect the opinion of others, and therefore you don't impose your own on them. Perhaps you suggest something, you may provoke reflection, but you never force anything, because now you know that you don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. Because you know your truth and you trust it, you believe also in yourself. Also, you don't get too attached to anything or anyone, and therefore you don't become dependent on others. And since you can clearly define your own value, that's why you become more selective and demanding, but in a positive way, of course. Now also, you're not afraid of taking risks or go beyond your comfort zone or go into unknown, because you know your possibilities. But I believe most importantly, you love everyone unconditionally, because you become more open and empathetic towards others. And also you're willing to help, but you don't let others take advantage on you. Honestly, I could go on and on, because in fact, the life of an awakened person is truly magical. Over the years of analyzing my past, I have realized how far from reality everyone's life actually is. And I say this because instead of focusing on ourselves, we are taught to focus on the outside world, but most of all, on other people. And so, based on what we observe in our surroundings, we create in our minds an illusory picture of life, which we call later our reality. And it actually starts from the moment we stop listening to our intuition and blindly follow the crowd. And this unfortunately means that we unknowingly, unconsciously give up our power to control our lives to others. So, in other words, without knowing another reality, we allow others to instill in us their limited beliefs about life. And so we become a prisoner of our mind. And this means that on the one hand, we live in constant fear because we have given our power to others, right? Where on the other hand, we feel constant emptiness and confusion. And therefore, we feel constant need to fulfill our whims and desires because we're thinking that this would eventually fill this void. And these two sensations are actually two of the strongest sensations that are really hard to control, my friend. And so, by living in constant fear, or by giving ourselves to our whims without any limits, we actually become an easy object to manipulate. And when we become one, we unconsciously allow others to program us according to their needs. And as a result, we distance ourselves from our truth. And therefore, we don't even give ourselves a chance to discover our true potential. And so, taught to look away from ourselves, we look at others and compare ourselves with them, thinking that we lack something. So, we unconsciously underestimate our own value, which in reality we don't even know. And we don't know it because we don't know ourselves. That's the truth. So, all these mental disorders, personality disorders, chronic diseases, and their causes come actually from our unawareness, lack of self-knowing, our truth, the truth of life. And that's why we make mistakes. We fall into addictions. We build toxic relationships. We fall into debts. Many, many more such examples, of course. And with our behavior, we hurt people, we hurt close people. And when we hurt them, in reality, we hurt ourselves as well. And then we say that life is difficult. Because, my friend, instead of focusing on the deep meaning of everything, we judge everything superficially. That's how they taught us to do. So, instead of being grateful and appreciating what we have, we still feel not enough, emptiness. And we feel it because in our thoughts, we create some, again, illusory deficiencies. And this inability to fill this void or to achieve the ultimate fulfillment of our whims makes us still feel dissatisfied. And that's why we complain. Therefore, let me remind you one more time. The only way out of this vicious circle is to work on yourself, understanding yourself, getting to know yourself. We should learn to look inside because it's actually there where you will find all the answers to your every pain. And yes, I admit that such transformation takes time. But the moment when you will free yourself from this prison of your own mind will be the most beautiful moment that you can experience. And although I say a moment, it's actually a moment which lasts forever. Imagine, my friend, once you have healed everything within yourself, you will finally be free from the fear that you may ever go back to your previous state. Do you understand? In addition to that, you will quickly find that with each successive stage, even greater satisfaction will arise from the progress you make. And this satisfaction, my friend, cannot be compared to anything else. Therefore, we should accept into our consciousness that in the life of, in fact, every living being, nothing matters more than the progress in development itself. So, the truth is that if you allow yourself a little freedom and you will open your mind to new possibilities, then you will automatically facilitate but also speed up the process of adaptation of any changes taking place in you and your life, even those occurring unexpectedly, spontaneously. And such developed ability to adapt to changes is one of the most powerful skills that a person can actually develop. Whereas when we're talking about our innate abilities, taking our imagination as an example, human being is able to create in his mind a vision of something that he may never have even seen with his eyes before. So in my opinion, this is an extremely unique ability of thinking man. And therefore, nurtured and practiced, such skill can become our most powerful tool in building our neurality. Therefore, following the example of my own experience, today, I can say with conviction, and I'm saying with conviction, that there is nothing in this world more important to learn than understanding and learning oneself. Because knowing yourself will help you appreciate and nurture your great values, your gifts, your talents, your skills. And when you know your potential, you're convinced that whatever stands in your way of achieving your goals or dreams, you'll always be able to overcome it. But, of course, that's not all. Because, my friend, by recognizing and appreciating your own values, you will also notice and appreciate the values of other people. And that's very important. This means that you will no longer feel the need to compare yourself with others, because now you will understand that each of us, in our own way, is equally unique. Remember this. Dear viewer, inner transformation, as you can see, is not a temporary state like the changes we make in our external appearance, for example. Because inner transformation is a permanent and irreversible state. So remember this. And so at the end, returning to the words I said at the beginning of this recording, I would like to add that even though in the past I have been told many times to finally come down to earth and to stop fantasizing, today, although I keep my feet on the ground, my preserved faith and the life experiences gained along the way have allowed me to realize everything that once was only a fantasy. Therefore, my dear viewer, my dear friend, never, but never let anybody with their limited beliefs try to rob you of your dreams. If you can create something in your imagination, in your mind, you may as well make it come true. Remember this. After all, it's not by accident that we were born with such wonderful ability. So, dear friend, dear viewer, never stop believing in your dreams, because it's through this strong faith that you manifest them into your reality. Dear viewer, our next upcoming episode, due to its very deep and difficult to understand subject matter, has been divided into two parts, where the first part is more of a scientific and therefore theoretical lecture, let's say, whereas the second part is the part in which we will translate the whole theory into real-life examples, so that you can assimilate this knowledge more easily, but also implement it in your life. And here I can already tell you that this is going to be a very unique episode. Look how excited I am. And it's going to be unique because it's in this episode that I will tell you about our multidimensional reality, including what is our universe made of, what does multidimensional reality actually mean, how does the universe work, what or who God is and what we are, how big is our potential, and what is the real concept of living in three-dimensional reality, and much, much more. Therefore, you should definitely watch this video, because what you will learn will change your approach to yourself and to life forever. So, I cordially invite you to watch the next coming two-part episode.